All right, it is now 1 o'clock Eastern Time here in beautiful New England, home of Alpha headquarters. And it's time to get started with the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I know it's been a few weeks since we've done one, several weeks because of last week's DevCon. So I'd like to welcome everyone here. I'd like to remind everyone that this is a questions-driven webcast. So type your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel, and it keeps these sessions more lively. So I'm joined today, like I am most Wednesdays, by Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer at Alpha. So Dion, I'm going to see if you could just take yourself off mute, and let's get started. Are you there?
Yes, sir. I am off mute.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. Do you even remember how to do these webinars? It's been like 3 weeks, man.
Little rusty, but I think we'll get back into the groove on
I
things.
did one yesterday, and I was, oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, also, yeah, I know some of the technology stuff, but I feel like I've done a 3-day webinar based on last week, so I feel
true.
pretty good
That's
about
true.
that.
Yeah, good.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. We really missed you guys, and we look forward to always talking with you. And we're back in the groove. We're on the home stretch for the rest of the year. Man, Halloween just around the corner, and getting ready for that. It's going to be a fun time, and Thanksgiving will be here before you know it. So we'll be publishing a schedule to make sure you know when days or webinars. We'll kind of lay it out because of everything coming up, so you'll know. And we hate it when people go, hey, where's the webinar? And they didn't know it was not available, or we were off in Orlando doing our DevCon. So we'll make sure everybody's aware of that. But things are going great. We had a fabulous time. I'd like to start out first and foremost to remind you, and as Dave mentioned, put your questions into the Q&A section or the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will be monitoring those and try to get to as many as we possible can today. I've got a little recap for DevCon, just a very brief one. We're going to do a more extensive one next week. And also I have a little demonstration that came from one of our fine contributors who had a question. We finally got it all resolved, and we wanted to share that with everybody. But do go to the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel and put your information in there. Real quick, fabulous event. I really like this year's DevCon. I mean, I always enjoy DevCon. I always enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy the events. I enjoyed all the information. But this year was really fun. It was a very tightly focused, fast-moving event. I think everybody had a great time. I wanted to say thank you very much to REA Inc., who helped us out on sponsoring this year's DevCon, and also wanted to say thank you to all the extensive presenters, because obviously we had our core presenters, which were the tech team, the developers, some of the management, but we had a lot of really good guest presenters who were clients of Alpha, and they did some great presentations. They opened the kimono and shared the information with all the other people, and people gave very detailed rundowns of what they're doing with Alpha, what they're planning on it, and that went really well. And I found I sat in a bunch of those, and I had a great time because it really kind of showed me the breadth of what people are doing with Alpha Anywhere, and more importantly, how people are starting to take Alpha Transform. And remember, Transform Tuesdays. Please sign up at guides@alphasoftware.com. People are starting to incorporate Transform into their existing infrastructures very successfully, and they're able to rapidly expand and do things that they had really considered doing before, but were concerned with time and effort, and they're actually able to execute on that. So seeing those examples for me was one of the highlights of the event. I really liked the environment. It was great, good weather. We lucked out. The hurricane kind of passed us by there. I'm sorry to hear all the devastation, man. It was very up in the panhandle. We're so sorry to hear about that, and hope everybody gets back on their feet rapidly. I know there's a lot of work to be done on that area. But we had a really good environment, good event, good weather, a lot of fun areas around where it's at. And I think I had a good time. If anybody's can pipe in, go ahead and put in your questions area, any kind of comments that you might have, and we're going to take all that information and digest it. And we're already starting DevCon 2019, so that's actually in. So any of your feedback is always helpful for us. So if you attended DevCon, please let us know. If you didn't attend, let us know why not. Was it, what was the consideration? What was it, just you were tied up with other things? Was there a better venue that you want to go to? We want to know all that because it allows us to really continue to enhance and improve the DevCon and make it a successful event for everybody. So again, thank you for everybody who joined us. And for those who didn't, we look forward to seeing you in next year's because it's just going to keep getting better and better and better. And we're going to do a little more deep dive into some of the information that was presented there next week on our weekly webinar and Q&A. And so you'll be able to get a little peek of what went on. And I know Dave's furiously grabbing all that content, putting it together and getting it ready for the people who attended and also for our meetings next week, which will be a lot of fun. Dave, I keep an eye on those questions. I hope people are waking up and putting those questions in. I know they're a little rusty also in terms of that. But what I wanted to do today was spend a few minutes. We had one of our esteemed colleagues who is who attends our webinars consistently present us with a unique challenge. It was a very interesting one, and I did some research and we came up with a solution for it. And I wanted to kind of share that to the greater set of people. The challenge was this, the fact that most people now, most people now, and actually what's interesting, I'll show you some examples, but the web browser is really becoming the center of their daily work behaviors, meaning that what they do is now more and more almost all within the web browser. So obviously they're running laptops, desktop machines, etc., maybe some mobile, but when they're on the web browser, they're using that mobile environment. And you'll see that, with the modern mobile, or better yet, web environment, you have a tab concept. So I can open up and have multiple tabs up and running in this. So I can go up and look for my updates for Alpha Anywhere. I can open up another tab and I can go to, say, the release notes for this. I can open up another tab and go to my documentation site. And the nice is I can have these tabs open and each one has that content, and I'm able to quickly move between the different systems. And people are really starting to use very heterogeneous systems, meaning that they're using Google stuff for things. Some people are using Apple pieces, they're using the Alpha. And so they're mixing and matching all these different web-based applications, Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, you name it, into this tab, and they jump between tabs on their daily business. And Alpha is no different. People are developing applications and they'll open up those applications in their web browser and they'll open up in the tab. Well, the question came in was the following, was that the individual had a scenario where they had an application, and the application, kind of think of it as a multi-tenant application, meaning that based on how you logged in and how you set your session variables, you get a certain set of data. And what they wanted to be able to do is within each of the individual tasks, and I apologize, my system's a little slow today because I'm still in the process of uploading all those videos from last week. We took a bunch of videos of the presentations and Dave is working through those, but my Wi-Fi or my system is going very slow, so it's not loading up everything very quickly, but there we go. So the idea is they wanted to be able to say, hey, on this tab, I'm sort of focusing on this content, this tenant, this tab, this tenant, this tab, and if I make some adjustments. Well, they started by using session variables to kind of trap that information, and that's a good way to do. You log in, you set a session variable. But the issue became this, is that they would start out with one tab, they would log in with the session variables, and they'd start using their application, and then they go, okay, you know what? I'm going to open up another tab, and I'm going to log in with that other, or I'm going to access the pages and set the session variable there. And now I want to work in that other environment, that other tenant essentially, and see a different set of data. Well, the downside of that is that when they went back to their original tab, since it was a session variable, when you did your updates, it read the updated new session variable in the new tab, because you really only have one session. These tabs work within a session. So your web browser is maintaining that session information along with the Alpha server. And so if you change your session variable, then that session variable on the good news is available in all the tabs. On the bad news is that if you're using them in the kind of way the individual wanted to use them, all of a sudden you'd go here and all of a sudden, boom, I'd be seeing what was in my other tab there. So I worked with them and understood what their challenge was, and we came up with kind of a way to handle this. And it's a really cool little feature, and it really uses the arguments feature inside of Alpha. And I don't know if I'm sure most people who are attending this have used arguments. Think of them as UX level variables that you can use. You can pass arguments into UXs. They're very flexible. They're very powerful kind of capabilities. So let me go ahead and go in to my development environment real quick, and let me show you a demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and publish to my local web root and open that. So I'm in the for the people who are new, I'm in my development environment here, and I'm opening that up in my tab browser. And I'm going to go ahead and open up another one. So now I'm going to have essentially what the individual is looking for is 2 different tabs here. So you'll notice that in this tab, the home, sort of my index page, I'm going to select a country. And then from the end on, when I'm using information in this tab, I want that country information to be used as that example. So I'm going to go ahead and select a country. Let's go ahead and select Ireland. I'm going to click customers. Okay. So you'll notice in here, I'm in a tabbed UI. In here, I have a grid, and this grid is filtered based on country for this grid. So sort of like the tenant concept in this tab now, what I want to do is anything I want to do, I want it to be focused around the country, Ireland. Now I'm going to go over here to this UX here, and I'm going to select, let's say, Norway, and I'm going to click there, and now you'll notice this grid here is Norway. Now, if I go back here, now notice, and I'll show you how I did that. When I actually clicked here, I set Norway as the session variable, but when I loaded this up, I loaded it into what was called a argument, and I'll use that. And I'll go in behind the scenes in the next few minutes and show you that. But in this case, I've got my Norway, and in this tab, I've got my Ireland. So watch, I can click reload customers, and you'll notice when it reloads it, it's using that Norway country to filter this. And if I go back to this UX, when I reload the customers, you'll notice it's still using Ireland. So I could actually go back here and say, you know what, I want to open up a whole different country. Let's say I want to open up Germany. And so now I'm filtering on Germany in this tab right here, or Germany. So I can click reload customers, you'll notice here. But when I go to this UX right here and click reload customers, Ireland is still there. And the reason that works is we're using an argument, and that's the power of this, is that once we set that argument and load this up, then that sticks. Whereas if you use a session variable, and I was modifying session variables, if I were to hit reload customers here and I set the session variable differently, and in the filter criteria for this grid to be that session variable, then when this grid reloaded, instead of reloading for Ireland, it would reload to whatever the latest session variable would be. And that's the power. And this is very nice. Now I don't have to worry about, I can kind of have control over my environments to be able to see the different stuff and what goes on from there. So let's go ahead and spend a few minutes just diving under the covers to show you how I set this up and how I'm using arguments instead of session variables to address this information. So let me go ahead and go into the Alpha development environment. And first I have something called the landing page, and that's what this is here. When I go to this page right here, I'm finding that. So let me see if I do have, let me make sure I set that up correctly. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is the landing page, and the landing page is pretty simple. All it is a country drop down and a go to page button. So again, when I'm here, I have a country drop down and a go to page, and I named it customers there. So if I set it public and I click here, it then goes to this right here. So you'll notice right here, in here in this go to page, I'm actually telling it go to my next page and set this country information into it. And actually I changed that. That was originally how I do it, but what I really do, which is very powerful, is that after I click this button right here, I set a session variable to be what the value is of the drop-down box. So what I do is I set a session variable when I select that, but when I open up the destination UX where that grid's gonna be, I set an argument in there. In fact, let me go ahead and go in there, open this up real quick, and I'll show you that in our document, you have this country and you have the embedded object right there. But when this UX opens up, we set the argument of type country to be session.country. So what's going on is let me go here. When I click here and I select that and I click go, at that moment in time, it sets a session variable. Now, when it loads up this UX right here, it is going to, at that point in time, take that session variable and put it into an argument. So now it's taken it out of the session variable and put it into an argument. And this is just the way I set it up here. There's different ways you could pass it via page variables, but I wanted to kind of hide it from that standpoint. Now, the cool thing about it is that once it is in that argument and I have set that argument up, I can now use that argument to filter all this, and I've disconnected it from the session variable. So if I go in here and I go to this embedded object, you'll notice over here that I have base filter is country is equal to the country code. So basically in this filter for this embedded grid, I filter it based on that country argument. So when this UX opens up, I pull the data out of the session variable and put it into my argument. Now, in my items in here, I can then use that argument to then do filtering, set defaults, etc., whatever it happens to be you would like to do from there. Now, the important aspect about that is that once I've extracted it from the session variable and put it into the argument, as long as this UX is open and running, that argument value is not going to change. Because you'll notice in the server-side action, on-dialog initialize only happens when you first open up that UX for the first time. So this is going to run once when you open it up. And then after it is opened up, then this information, these statements won't run again. So once you've opened it up, it's taken that country out of the session and stuck it into the argument. Therefore, I can then go change this session variable, and so long as I don't reopen up this, then that argument value is going to stay the same. And if that argument stays the same, then your filter criteria and other aspects will also stay the same. And therefore, I can then go open up a second tab, set a session variable temporarily, set the argument, and now I haven't screwed up anything on my first tab. I can do that over and over and over again. And it even works pretty cool, is that if I actually go in here and refresh this, that starts it out here. I can go to customers right here, and by clicking reload customers, I'm just saying refresh this grid. It's going to remember that argument value, in this case of Belgium, and use that in this grid from that standpoint here. And if I want to, I can click select country. This takes me back to that original UX. I click on something, I set the session variable, it opens up this UX, it sets the argument, and then it uses that new argument for that. And anytime I reload and use the information, as long as it stays open. Now, if I refresh it as I do here, well, it goes back to here because I don't, what I want to do is say, hey, I want to make sure I stay, that I know which item they want from that standpoint, and I can set that session variable there. So the final solution is I can have as many of these tabs open as I want. Each of these tabs can have different arguments and can be working differently. So therefore, I could log in the morning as maybe I'm checking the country of Brazil and I want all my work to be done in Brazil. And then the afternoon, I can open up a second UX, or a web page, go through that process, see the select a different country, and I don't have to worry about this country being screwed up because the session variables. And I hope that gives you a little flavor on that. So the trick here is, again, when first on this one is all I'm doing is temporarily setting that country into the session. And then if you'll notice in this case, what I'm actually doing is I'm saying go to my destination page. And in that destination page, by the way, just to let you know real quick, you'll see in there before I was passing this country code, you don't have to do that. Since I set it in session variable and grab it out, this was the old way I was doing it. The only downside of this is that you see in your URL this information, so you actually see the country code. You may not want that. You may want to kind of pass it behind the scenes, and that's where session variables are nice, because session variables only exist on the server. They don't exist on the browser. So the person would, maybe it's a customer ID number or something like that. You don't want to expose from that standpoint. Then once you're on here, I set up and grab that argument out and set that argument value. And then from then on, I can use that in my filter, my initialization, anything I want. In fact, that's argument information is available in all your server-side code. So if you're running XBasic scripts or doing something like that, you can reuse those there. And you can also publish arguments to be client side also. So if you need that argument information in your JavaScript running on the web browser, you're able to do it from that standpoint there. So that's how we came up with it. I think it will work really effectively because that allows them to kind of set it and forget it and feel confident that they're not going to have crossover where when you log in one tab, set session variables, you screw it up in another. If there's any questions on how I put this together, I'll be glad to go over that and answer those questions. And again, we really want to appreciate and say thank you to the individual who, and the person who shall not be named, for telling us, because it allows us to learn something new and come up with a different design pattern in which we could use and kind of explain to the world how best to use and set up these kind of environments. And I mentioned earlier, the multi-tab world is becoming very powerful, meaning that it's becoming the de facto standard. In fact, there are companies that are coming out now with essentially like fancy tab managers. So a company can actually say, okay, a user logs into their web browser and it actually goes to a web page and it opens up an environment. And in that environment is a series of icons with the different systems they have for that particular customer, for that particular person who's using the web browser. And they basically are creating essentially desktops in the web browser to kind of manage their daily information. It manages all those tabs up top. You can group them together. So it's really interesting how it used to be the world was the desktop, but now most people's world is their web browser and their tabs. That's becoming how they do their daily desktop. And what's very interesting is that people are actually building systems to help manage that and kind of create desktops. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's kind of interesting from there. But if you have any questions, let me know about how this worked. If I went over something too quickly, let me know. And we also have, I think, some other questions that we want to get to in this session today.
Cool. So one question, this one is for me. So arguments on separate tabs they don't talk to each other. Is that sort of the deal, that
yes,
they're separate and isolated from each other? Whereas
yes,
a session variable is, if I set a session variable on one tab and then hopped over to the other tab in the same browser, then that would be the case, but an argument wouldn't be the case.
Right, and the reason for that is that an argument is associated with the UX. So you define the argument on the UX. And we use that a lot.
Right.
When we launch, like when we go from grids to UXs, let's say you want to edit a record, you can pass arguments to that UX. And so since that is now tied to this UX, once I've set that argument in the onDialog initialize, then from then on, that argument's kind of stuck in there. Now you can change that on the fly. There's XBasic code that allows you to modify it. You'll notice right here that basically I'm saying, it's a little confusing, but I'm saying set the value of argument to the session variable, and vice versa. I can read that value of that argument by just omitting this. I can say, give me the value of that argument there. But it's at the UX level. Whereas session variables, when I set it to session, now that's on the server. So if I'm in another tab and I've set the session variable and I go into here, if I use that session variable anywhere, it's gonna go to the server. Hey server, I need the session variable for country. What is that now? Oh, that's Germany. Oh, okay, I'm going to now refresh this grid with that value Germany. It's like, whoa, that's not what I wanted. But since it's at the UX level, when I click reload customers, it says, okay, I'm going to refresh this grid. This grid has an argument called customers. I'm going to look at the UX I'm on right now, and I'm going to go behind the scenes. And that UX was set originally to be Brazil. So now I'm not going to use the session variable. I'm going to use that argument. And thus it stays the same as long as this UX is open and hasn't been refreshed. And that's why I can kind of work things separately in each of these UXs, because once the UX is open and set, you're locked in.
Cool.
Good question. Thank you.
So I think this whole notion of arguments is actually a really great topic. There seem to be at least a couple of questions. One person asking where the argument is defined. Maybe we could back up a little bit and talk about Besides being able to log in as different people, what arguments are good for, and what some of the benefits are. I know certainly security is a big benefit when it comes to arguments. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
first and foremost, arguments are defined um, um, in the properties. So if you go to your properties for UX, I'm going to open up a grid too. Let me go ahead and just open up a grid. I've got a grid here. If you go into the properties area and you click here and you search for arguments, you'll see arguments is right here, and you can open it up and you can create multiple arguments. And you can see when you create it, you can either set the value at runtime, like the value of a hidden field or something like that, or get it from a variable. And you can see in this case, you can get it from either a page variable or you can get it from a session variable, whichever way you want to do it from that standpoint. And then once that argument is set up, then it is on this UX, or in the case of a grid, we can go to properties and search for arguments. Oh, it's not there actually. Arguments here is on the query. You'll see define arguments. You can define the arguments here. So arguments exist both on the grid and also on the UX component from there. Now, as Dave mentioned, that one item it's used is for local information. So for instance, you'll notice in here in my, actually, let me go here. In my grid control right here, you'll notice my base filter says country is equal to, and then in colon, country. So I'm using my argument there. But let's say I created a field on here, and I'll call this junk, just to put something on the screen. Arguments are also handy because if I go over here to default value, I'm going to scoot this up here, you'll see that I can set the default value to be an argument by just using the nomenclature equals colon. So I would sit there and I go equals colon country. Okay. So arguments not only used for, that, but also, and you'll see now, so when this field is initialized, the default value is going to be that country code. So it's going to sit there and go, oh, it's equal to something. Oh, it's equal to the argument. So in the case, it will be, so if I'm adding new records on my UX, I can set that so it goes to Germany or Brazil or everything else from there. Now, as Dave mentioned, there's another very important reason to use arguments. So let me go to my grid here and let me go into here. So I can define an argument. I'm just going to create an argument here, and I'll call it test or whatever. Actually, I'll just call it country. Okay, and I'm going to set that variable. I'll set it runtime or always prompt. So for now. Now, once I've set that argument, I have an argument. Then think of it as like a variable that's at the grid level. Then when I create my filters here, I can go, for instance, country is equal to, and I can insert the country or the argument or arguments I created. So now what's going to happen is when this filter occurs, it's going to look at that argument and then say, oh, what is that? Oh, put it in here. Now, a very powerful thing about arguments where we use a lot is whenever you're emitting a SQL statement, you may have heard of SQL injection attacks. And this was a trick people found out a long time ago, that if people had just plain old SQL script, they could actually, instead of passing in like a country, they could actually pass in a whole statement like select star from users, or select username kind of password from users table or something like that. And what would happen is you would see people would, they were just using HTML and emitting it on the screen. People could actually put in these statements, passing them into this statement here, and it would just run that SQL, and all of a sudden you would see the information out, so you could hack accounts. Well, what happens is with arguments, arguments understand what kind of variable they are, so they help prevent SQL injection accounts or attacks. So it's actually a safety measure. So you should always try and use arguments whenever you're doing anything with SQL, because if someone maliciously types something in, like, so let's say I wanted them to ask what the country is. So they would type in Germany, and then I'd say company is into Germany. Actually, let me go ahead and see if this will work here. Let me go here. And you'll notice I made that argument a prompt. It should ask me, did I put, let's see, define arguments, always prompt. Oh, country, why is it? Let me see here. Control type, text box. Oh, okay. Okay, so watch this. I'll go in here and it says country. I'll type in Germany. And when I submit it, it sets the argument and then it runs this. So every time I run this, in this case, this is a default, I can put in Ireland and click submit, sets the argument, then loads it up from there. But here's what people would do. They go, oh, tricky. So I'd go select star from security. And so that's a SQL command. And then what it would do is if you didn't have arguments, it would just put this into that other SQL command. And depending on how it was structured, all of a sudden it would spit out, our grid has a lot of other protections, but if you just had HTML on the page, all of a sudden it might spit out the result of that. So you can see a list of usernames and possibly if unsecured their passwords and stuff like that. You'll notice in this case, it doesn't give me records because it's trying to, it's actually managing that properly. And that's very important if you have like number fields, because you can define the type of argument, whether it's text, number fields, dates. It's smart enough to understand how to format that date or number so that when it runs inside the SQL command that it works properly. So highly recommend you always use arguments as much as possible, because it's not only a very efficient and also a professional way to do it, but it also helps prevent SQL injection attacks and other security problems that are associated with it. And you'll find over time, it just becomes a really good way to, especially if you're doing any kind of SQL commands inside of XBasic, you're able to do, you're able to run them more efficiently and just it makes it more readable and more professional. So definitely use arguments there. So thank you, Dave. Appreciate that.
Excellent. Nothing but arguments for the first part of it. It's fantastic. So the next question, totally switching gears here, asks about how to make Alpha Anywhere web applications beautiful and visually appealing. We did a session on DevCon about making apps look good, but I think it missed the mark. It was a little bit too technical. It talked a little bit too much about Photoshop. But I know you, Dion, have worked with Bootstrap in the past, and I was wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about that. And if you do have some examples to show, that would be cool. And the other thing I'd like to say is that I'm going to put together a presentation that's really meant for non-designer programmer types to take their applications and make them look good. We've tried this several times over the past using artists, and sometimes they haven't quite hit the mark in terms of talking to developers. So I've decided that I'm going to actually roll up my sleeves and try to put together a presentation myself. Hopefully that'll be in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see how that goes.
Absolutely. So the number one thing to consider when you're doing it is that everything in Alpha is done using CSS. So CSS is the heart of it. And in fact, and let me go ahead and open up the web style builder. Do I have a local style? I can do that. I'll just go ahead and select Alpha and open that up. Create a local one here. Well, so I'm just creating a local copy of it, but built into it is the Alpha CSS, are basically the web style builder that allows you to modify styles. So you'll be able to see all that. And you can see this is the structure of how Alpha is there. So this is the Alpha style, and you can have multiple styles associated with your project. You can obviously modify them as you see fit. One thing that's really powerful now is that we're starting to use more and more Sass, which is a CSS technology. So I can just go in here and say, I want my alternative color to be kind of a blue color. And once you've set that color, then it ripples throughout all of your CSS to make your CSS use that new color. So you don't have to do a find and replace to search and find all those elements there. Now, you will be seeing there's a lot of work that's being going on right now to improve and enhance the ability to make our apps look better and better. And I want to focus on a couple areas that are important. First is that you're able to obviously modify these styles as much as as you want. We also have something called sub-themes, which are alternative styles that are going to be coming out. There's a lot of new sub-theme capabilities, which will give you neater, nicer looking buttons, little text effects, and things along those lines. Now, another key thing I'd like to talk about is, and let me go ahead and open up my demonstration project, is more and more we're moving to using, and this is becoming very powerful because it allows you to have infinite styling capabilities, and more importantly is use external HTML and styles, is the view box control. And we're starting to use that more and more. So the view box control is important. So let me go ahead and just grab one of these list view box. Let me try this one right here. Okay. So as you can see, I have a list control, and this is a view box. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the view box here. So the view box control is cool because of two things. One is that it's data driven. So in this case, I'm using static JSON, but I can also connect it to lists, to web services, you name what it is. But the cool thing about a view box is the fact that it is just HTML and CSS. So what that allows you to do is you're able to now use off-the-shelf HTML and CSS to represent your data. And we're starting to see more and more examples of that, where people are using it to create very nice looking user interfaces because they're able to actually just use HTML and CSS, and there's many templates out there. So I can come in here and add my own CSS in here. So let me go ahead and add a CSS. Let's say, I think it's called my test. Okay, and I'm going to say maybe the font family is, let's see, Gothic, and the side, let's say the color of the text is kind of a reddish color there. So you'll see what it's doing is it's just adding color into it, and you can add in any CSS. So that's using the built-in CSS editor, and you actually can edit it right in here and make changes, see what it looks like, etc. But then what you can do is in your view box layout, you can now start associating styles with that. What I call that style, I called it my test. I don't know if this works. I'm not a super expert on this, so preview that.
It should be class equals my test, not style equals my test.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, I haven't done a whole lot of this recently, so it should be class equals. But as you can see, we're just accepting good old standard HTML and CSS. And let me see if this actually works here. So notice this.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So now this view box right here and also the list control can be rendered and managed through CSS and through HTML, which gives you infinite flexibility. And CSS is so powerful now. You know, people are using third-party design tools to create very nice looking CSS. And you can then just take that CSS either in the view box or you can just add that CSS right in here. You can also, by the way, which is powerful, is in the properties here. If someone just gives you a CSS file, you can link that file to this UX, and then now those styles that came with that UX or with that style sheet are just available for everything on the UX. So, you know, once you kind of get your style going from there. So right now, your two primary tools are the, if you want to make quick changes to the web style, like change colors and fonts and other things like that, you can use the web style builder. But I'm seeing more and more people are starting to use view boxes because of this flexibility of being able to take the data that you would want. So notice in here, I have some HTML, but you'll notice there's some items in little curly brackets. Well, those are fields that are coming from my data element. And this is all called about templating, the whole concept. And actually at the DevCon, Selwyn gave a presentation and really talked about the fact that JSON and client-side / server-side templating is the future of where everything's going at, meaning that you have data in yours. In this case, this is static JSON. Oops, let me cancel out of that and reopen that. So data is either in your list control. In this case, I'm grabbing and pulling some static data in here, but that data can be also, in really where we're moving towards is that when a list controller view box is working, everything is done using JSON. And then that JSON represents the data source field information. Let me go ahead and grab some sample data here. So this is the data. You can see it's a set of first name, last name, city, state. So the information coming in is static JSON, and then in the layout itself, we're using HTML with templates, which will insert those items there. So there's some really good, and actually there's a great, let me go here, and I want to, there's a great series of articles about JSON and more importantly, templating. And they're really worthwhile reading here. Oh, template. Might actually be good to actually spell. Okay. Let's see, client assign. Might be templating. There we go. And so this is details, but the idea behind it is client side templates and server. It's JSON templating. So there's a great article on JSON. Oh, these are all the array methods and things like that. But more and more, JSON is really the core data element that we use. And then, so in the alpha documentation Senate, you can go through and there's a lot of really good stuff. Oh, that's still being worked on right here. We have all the functions, but actually Selwyn went through and showed some really cool JSON functions where it takes data from the database and translates it into JSON. And once you have it into JSON, that JSON can be fed to any one of our user controls like list, view boxes, etc. And so really the heart of where we're going from styling is to look at the kind of controls like view box, list controls, etc. Because now you have complete styling over there because you can use a combination of CSS and HTML. Now, as Dave mentioned, I did some work with Bootstrap, and that's perfectly valid. The tricky part with Bootstrap, just to let you know, is that Bootstrap has a set of JavaScript libraries that come with it, and they will conflict with the alpha built-in libraries. There's some instructions in the documentation site that tell you how to kind of rechange some of the language in the client side or in the JavaScript libraries that you insert so they don't step on each other. But I'm finding more and more, you know, Bootstrap is a very, very popular one, but there's other frameworks out there. And really when it comes down to it, you can hire a off-the-shelf CSS HTML designer who can give you this HTML and give you this CSS, and then all you need to do is connect it together using the built-in tools to insert fields and other things. So that's kind of a little bit, you know, that really deserves almost a full day on how to do styling. Yeah. But yeah, and we're working on improving and making it easier for our developers to do styling in Alpha Anywhere.
Excellent. So someone said, hey, what were the problems? Did people like using Xara? Was there a problem with using Xara? And Xara, which is a program kind of like Photoshop, kind of like Paint Shop Pro, is actually terrific. I believe there are people who are still using it today. So Xara, yeah, we years ago did a bundle with that company.
Yeah.
No, it's with an X. Yeah.
Yeah. And it looks like they're starting to move away.
As things, another thing people often do is they'll go to Wrap Bootstrap, and maybe we could talk just a second about Bootstrap. We can go to the Wrap Bootstrap thing and just get ideas for what they want their application to look like, even if they don't use the exact Bootstrap code to make it so. It's a really just good place to get inspiration.
Yes. Yeah. And also just to let you know too is, sorry, thing is going off in La La Land. It's an ongoing effort. So a couple areas that are really cool is the tabbed UI now uses the expanding menu, which makes it more responsive. We'll have a template that's going to use UX instead of a tabbed UI, so you'll be able to use that. We're also adding new controls in here. For instance, like the JavaScript controls, by the way, are all JavaScript and HTML. And then also we have the expanding menu. We go in here. And the expanding menu also it uses JSON and HTML and CSS. So it's really going to become a lot easier as you move forward to basically say, okay, here's your menu color, but then you can put in your own CSS classes. So for instance, built in, you could also use your custom CSS to style everything. And that's the direction we're going to. So really, I highly recommend, learning a little bit more about CSS, but the reality is there's so many really good designers for a CSS that you can basically wireframe it, sketch it out, and a good CSS designer can provide you the HTML and CSS you need to make it look the way you want it from that standpoint.
Cool. All right, another question, and also sort of a different topic, is this person is interested in, if I can read it right, something like image maps. So instead of making a selection using a drop-down list, they want to, for example, have a map of the United States and say, click on Massachusetts or Texas to make a selection that way.
Ah, good point. Well, what's cool about that, and first and foremost, you can, you can create free ones online.
Mm-hmm.
So you can upload and you can select and, put it in there and it will create that image map. So let me try this real quick, see if I have an example of that. Okay, this will be a good one. Let's try this. Okay. So then I can say, okay, here is like my first one here. So, okay. That's my first one right here.
Okay, Valve 1. Yeah.
Test. And I'll add a new area here, and this will be my second one. There it is. Just a little sluggish here. Okay. So here's the code. So this is the source, the image source, and use maps. So I can actually copy this stuff here, right there. I can go into Alpha, and guess what? In the view box, I can drop that stuff directly into a view box right here. Or another method you could use is the following, is you can go into a, I think we have it here, a freeform layout is similar to a view box, and you can just paste anything in right there. Okay. Now this is not going to work really well because I don't have that image in here. I don't think the image is going to show up. Yeah, notice the image is not showing up, so it doesn't here. Now, here's the real trick on this, is that just creates the map. So you'll notice that you have this thing called an image map, and the target is here.
And this is just standard HTML or HTML5, isn't it? Right. It's just something that browsers know how to deal with anyway.
Right. Okay. Yep. So the real trick here is, and I'd probably actually, you know what? The real trick here is this href, which means when the person clicks on this area, it triggers this href. So in HTML world, you would navigate to a different page, maybe a detail for that country or things like that. In the alpha world, what you can do, which really kind of fun, let me try this real quick. I'm going to just create a view box here. And again, it's not going to show the image, so I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it, but I'm going to go into the view box here. And I'll go view box map. And I'll go in here and I'll go to my view box layout and I'll paste that right there. Now, view box has something called an item. So let me go ahead and do this, and I'll go test item. And a item is an action. So then I can go on click here. I can put in any action JavaScript I want. But in this case, I'm just going to put in a little piece of text here. So I'll go alert, hello. Okay. Now what's cool is once I've created that item, I can go back into the layout right here, and I'll actually just do this. I'll go, I'll insert a link here. Let's go test link. And I'm going to make this a P. Let's see if this works. I'm learning more about this, and then right here we can insert item test. Okay. Okay. So this little item, when I inserted it into my HTML now Alpha knows in this P to trigger something. So let's see if that actually works. It's not going to show the map, but I just kind of want to give you a view of where it's kind of going there. So you notice, watch what happens. When I click on this test link right here, it fires that JavaScript. And that could be a full Alpha XBasic backend or do something like that. So the power here is you can take any HTML, you can add items, and all items are actions, and you can either define them as JavaScript, or I could go up here and add a new action and put in, use action JavaScript to do all the things we want to do there. And then what you do is in your layout, you add your item here. So what I would do is I'd go here, and instead of doing a href, I can actually go right here into this and then add that art item in here. And I'd have to test this, but if you clicked inside this target area, then it's going to fire off this action, which could do something. And what's cool about items too is you can associate data with them. So you can do some really fancy stuff in terms of associating data with items. So not only will it trigger an action, but it'll also say, oh, that action is associated with data element XYZ, whatever it happens to be. So the real trick here is in our documentation is if you want to do that, spend time with the view box, because the view box will allow you to paste that HTML in there. HTML will render the things, have all those things. And then the view box items and data elements will then turn that into a live item. So it allows you to, you'll notice here, it displayed this HTML like a phone number as a list here. Here's a map that you can actually put in there. And when you click on the map items, it triggers that item that then triggers the JavaScript to do whatever it happens to. We're also see people are now starting to use it as a client-side report writer, since what will happen is you can pull data in, which will be JSON, either from a list or back in, and then using that HTML and the JSON, you can create very nice looking HTML outputs. And the cool thing about this is very, very interesting because it's like near instantaneous on update. So it's really fast and responsive. So for the person who's interested, the answer is absolutely. You can build maps using third-party tools. Then you can bring those maps into the view box here, and you're good to go. Let me try this. I wonder if inspection image. I want to try one other thing here. Let's do something real quick. Let me see, control panel. Let's go here. Let's go to images. Let's go ahead and add that file here. And let's see, pictures, and I think it was that one. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a live preview. I'm just trying. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to waste people's time. I'm not sure if that image is available. Yep, okay. So it rendered the image in here. This view box is a little small. Now it's not getting the click event here. Where is that? Is it up here? Where did I put that first map? Oh, wait, yeah. Oh, I see. It's a hover event. Yep. Notice how my finger's over here? And notice test. See, it worked. I'm sorry that it may not look like it's working. In fact, I want to prove it to you. I'm still, this is off the cuff, so bear with me, everybody.
All right.
Okay, so I've got my image here. In fact, let me make this a little more interesting. Let me go back here and take this. Since we're doing, I'll put a panel layout. No, I don't want a navigator. I want a layout. Okay. And then another thing is use panel layouts as much as possible in panel cards, because I worked with a lot of people at the event last week, and they weren't aware of all the amazing things you do with panel cards and panel layouts. This will just present a little bit. Oh, live preview, since we have to show it in there. Okay. So now we should see this. Okay. Oh, one little adjustment. This view map over here, like a list, I'm going to say fill container. And click on the right thing here.
I'm excited to see this work.
I'm too. It's going to work, Dave.
It's going to work. No, I have faith. I have faith.
Ye of little faith. Okay. So I'm going to go up here.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go ahead and click on that area right there. And it's not showing, I wonder why it's not showing my alert here, but it was showing it over there. That's what I get for getting fancy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the place to look, though. Or at the very least, if you didn't use a VBox, you could definitely do it in an HTML container just as an image map and then
Yes.
have those hrefs work. But getting it to work in a VBox, I would definitely look at that
Yeah, and the
as the
reason
first
why,
way to do it. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, because that view box, I'll tell you. Oh, yeah. Wait. Where's my test thing? Because the heart of the view box, which makes it just amazing, is that when I'm in the view box here, it's this alert here. I go to these items and I'll go alert, hello. Oh yeah, it's not actually working right now. It said test, it didn't say hello world. Um, and you know what I bet it is that it could be, oh, now I
What
know
if you
why
remove
it's
the
not working.
href?
I have to
Okay.
actually, there's no thing in there. So I'm going to go here,
There's
this
only five
target area
item.
right here. I'm going to put in insert item test. Okay, so now I've added a test to that item. Save that. Let's do a working preview real quick, and then we'll give up after this because people are probably like, oh, I'm bored. Move on. Check that out. Look at how powerful that is.
Whoa, look at
Isn't that
that.
amazing? Check that out.
Wow,
And
right
that's
off the
why
cuff.
view box.
That's why you make the big bucks, Dan. That is
Ah,
fantastic.
yeah, but
All
you just
right.
paste it in. You just got to figure. And the trick is these items, because what's
So
really cool.
can you show us how to build that image map again? I think we can
Oh,
probably
okay,
figure out
yeah.
how to paste that in. That was a cool little thing.
Yeah, let me walk through that a little closer. I was kind of
Yeah.
just hoping it would work. Okay, so I went to this called imagemap.net. I'm
Image-map.net.
putting it
Okay.
into the chat box right here.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's free. And you select an image from your PC or there. And then once you've selected that image, um,
And the tool looked
basically,
pretty easy. It's just like drag over the area you want and add a
yeah,
new area
so,
in.
and you can also do like a circle. So you can
Ooh.
dial like a circle in or,
What about, does it let you do some sort of freeform thing? Like if it's like a weird shape?
yeah, you can do polygon
Poly. Ooh, okay.
and then like,
Yeah.
and again, it's going to be linked to this image. So
Yep.
it's going to be definitely linked to that, but you put in there a link. You don't really care. So just put something in there, you
Yeah.
know, and then the title is, second area. And
That's
then the
probably good to
target
put a
could be
title in there for your own sake when you're doing the code later on to know what you're supposed to look it
exactly.
up
Yeah.
to.
So
Okay.
then you go show me the code. Show
Yep.
me the code.
Show me the
And what
code.
that does, there we go. It's pointed at your image here.
Yep.
And then it says use map.
Wow.
And then you can
Yep.
see, and the reason you want to put in that alt is then you know what that area is involved with. It's like my control panel part A, port B, etc. Then I just copied this stuff out. And I went into and by the way, some of these services, you can save your map when you log in, so you can go back and re-edit it later. There's tons of them out there. So I went into my view box. I just went right here and pasted that in there. And then the only other thing is I made sure that this image is part of my project. So when I publish it, it's available, because what it's going to do is it's going to look for that and put it up on the page and show as an image. You can adjust it as there. So now the next thing I did is I went ahead and just created my items, which are my actions here. Then when I go to my layout, I just found, like in this case, it's called an area. So it's this tag right there is defining that area. I just went in here and I just went insert item test. And you can see I can insert item arguments. So I could have the same item, but pass it arguments saying, control panel, detail record. So I could actually be passing it to a grid or to another UX or to a view box or whatever it happens to be to update. So I could have another view box where I could pass this information onto it. Anyway, then once you do that, it just inserts this in there. And now when I publish it, when that view box is running, it's going to be looking for the click events that's associated with this area. And when it sees that, it's going to take this and pass it to that item, which is then going to process it with JavaScript and maybe Action JavaScript. But you can get very sophisticated. Anything you can do with Action JavaScript now, you can add as an item into these view boxes.
Yep. So if you wanted to set a variable, choose a state, something like that, that's what your script could do when you click on that particular item.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Dion, great work, man. Just
Yeah.
pulling
Thank
that out
you.
of thin air and it all works. Excellent. So we have run out of time for questions. As always, if you have other questions you would like us to get to, please send them to guides, GYDES, at alphasoftware.com. Dion, thanks very much for presenting.
My pleasure.
Thanks to everyone who attended and those who asked questions especially. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care and goodbye.